Welcome to the Critics Talk with Dominik Graf, the festival is having a tribute. We thought would like to begin with talking about a Dominik Graf film that has just been shown. It's called Lawinen der Erinnerung. He interviewed Oliver Storz, an important character of German television. For this film, it's a portrait of Oliver Storz, but it's also a portrait of the development of Germany. Maybe we should also say, before that, we saw a film called Das Wispern im Berg der Dinge, which is a portrait of your own father. Those two films go together very well, as your father also started out in German television as an actor in the post-war years. It's also about the same time when Oliver Storz entered into German television, and Oliver Storz is kind of a father figure to you. You even say so explicitly in the beginning of the film. Mm. So maybe you would like to tell us something about what drew you to Oliver Storz, both as a subject and...
Yeah, well, I try to answer in English, and if I lack any vocabulary, I might need your help. So, yeah, Oliver Storz, I met the first time pretty late in December 2010, because I had read his novel Die Freibad-Clique, a small novel about boys in war in the last years, last months of the Second World War. He experienced all this himself, and that was so impressive that I didn't really have the idea of asking him if I could have the rights or something, but there were so intriguing moments in that novel that I wanted to get to know the guy who wrote this. And I actually knew him. He's not only a father figure in a way of my generation. For my generation, he's a father figure of the German TV, of the Bavaria film, where I worked quite a lot. So he was a completely known figure for me. He became very late from an author. He developed to being a director, and I found him. Everything I saw and I read about him. He also wrote in newspapers, sometimes about TV events in a very, very cool way, I would say. So I had a lot of respect for him, and we met in his house then in December 2010, and the evening was wonderful, very long, and the next morning I've decided to make a documentary about him, about his view, about him, the way he was talking about Germany, the way he was talking about the years in the war, after the war, which for my generation, I am born in '52, are somehow years we don't really understand. But I had a father who was 4 or 5 years older than Storz, but for me, from my perspective, they are close together. They suffered the war, they had to obey, and they made something out of it culturally after the war had ended. And they went through kind of identity changes from the Nazi young boy to the very, very, very engaged writer that he was, and democratic fighter that he was during his whole life. So we started this documentary. We needed quick help from the television, not to write long an expose and wait for 1 year until we get the money and we can start. It had to be quite quick, because a few days later I learned that he was quite seriously ill. We had to hurry in a way, and we made 2 interviews. One in which he was quite healthy still. I think one can see that in the film. And another one on which he insisted, when I was already at shooting Das unsichtbare Mädchen, he phoned me and said, if you want to know anything more, then you should better come and hurry. So that was on Pentecost 2011. And I didn't know that he was so ill, but we went through the whole thing, through the whole subject, through the whole scene, the whole continents of things that he had to tell once again, and we discovered different layers, and I didn't know that he was really close to death, and that was for me, very, very moving afternoon, because in a way it was saying goodbye.
Did you feel good about finding something like a father figure like him so late in your life, considering that the idea of a father figure is so rather important for the cinema of the Federal Republic of Germany. I mean, wrestling with the idea of the absent father, rejection of father figures, discovering them too late, etc. Were you happy?
Yeah, in a way, yes. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that I could find it there in the TV. In the TV screen of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, that was a surprise for me in the end. So when you start as a young filmmaker, you try to look for, of course, for examples and for Vorbild is what.
Guiding example.
Directly in cinema, in before you. But for my generation, coming shortly after the Autorenfilm in Germany, it was quite difficult to accept the Autorenfilmer as sort of elder brothers. There was a complete cut between them and us. I was in the 5th year of the Munich Film School. Wenders was in the 1st year, just to give you a chronological hint, and us. But between these two generations, already there was a gap. So that was no way to turn to. The German cinema before Autorenfilm also didn't really seem to work for me as an example, because my father had played in there, but even my father didn't take the films that he played in German cinema in the 50s and 60s very serious. For him, it was theater and it was television. Television, they had the subjects that had to be worked through after the World War. A young soldier coming back from the World War, experiencing terrible things. They had to do it in a different way, and the German cinema wasn't a place where he could find himself and his experiences. So maybe I should have earlier thought of that my really examples where I could go is the early German TV, but that came as an idea quite late.
Could you talk a bit about your days at the IFFR in München, because they were quite strange, very strange, almost anarchic periods, because I mean you had this kind of predecessor generation, which is by now mainly remembered for one of its lesser luminaries, Wim Wenders. Most of the really more interesting protagonists of that moment are more or less forgotten. Like actually one of your producers and one of your co-writers, Michael Hild and Bernd Schwamm. And on the other hand, you were kind of a first generation that really went for this idea of making kind of, let's say, genre cinema against all odds at the oddest of all places, which is television.
Yeah, what helped us to connect with the Munich Film School counted the classes with the alphabet. So they were A course and we were F course. That is sixth. Yeah, sixth. So what connected us was the absolute passion for American culture. That went through, and that also, as I noticed, connected me with Oliver Stolz, because that is something that goes through the whole West Germany from the early 50s till 2000 or so. We identify ourselves nearly with American popular culture, jazz, film, and all that. So that Michael Hild, about whom you just spoke, my producer for years, he was with Wenders together in the A course. Wenders went off to become world famous. Michael stayed there. He was my teacher also at the film school, and we needed some time to come together. And in the Bavaria later, where he went there as a producer, I went there to try and make my first small episodes for TV. There, the energy came together with these people who really changed the whole German TV at that time by making series like Schimanski, Tatort, Auf Achse series, then The Fahnder, of course. And for me, that was the ideal point to jump in and say, well, maybe I could improve my quite dilettantistic work of making films by using this kind of routine, this kind of confection as just learning the skills that I always wanted to learn. So that was something like a co-work.
Yeah. I think you once said that kind of the point of intersection for what is often referred to as the Munich sensitivists, this very early generation of the IFFR, and you guys later in for a generation that doesn't have a name but a face, so to speak, was actually the idea of genre, that you were both obsessed with the purity of genre, but for different means, so to speak.
In a way, yes. I found this passion for genre I found in the A course and this predecessors as well, but they did it differently, in a different way. I mean, that is quite daring to say. We found their films a bit boring. We wanted to change that. We wanted to make tense action films or genre films, but we needed them because they, in a way, I think they were our brain. They supported us also. I mean, my colleague at my course was Wolfgang Bühlt, which is a quite sinister figure in German film history, because he had enormous success directly after the film school with teeny movies like Gib Gas, ich will Spaß, with Nena and stars of the 80s.
Yeah.
And then he became more and more somebody who, well, the guy who did these astonishing 3 horror video films in the 10 years ago, changed into the offbeat cinema, in the independent cinema, which is normally in Europe not possible anymore now. So I went the different way. I went the opposite. I tried to be as artful as possible, because that was my look at the cinema at first, and then I changed because my art house films were so terrible. I had to somehow change my view and try to give myself another chance, and that was the real, very simple 25-minute films for Bavaria. Vorabendserie, I don't know how to say that, but it's just small TV episodes. And that gave me the kick to where I maybe could have started off new.
What were actually your examples at that point? I mean, what actually got your fascination with genre cinema going? Also a kind of genre cinema that you could kind of sync with your strong literary, let's say, instincts.
Well, that was also a link between Michael Hild and Bernd Schwamm and me, that they started to bring new American directors, and also old American directors then later, like Robert Altman. They were at this, I think in Biarritz, there was this American Film Festival.
Deauville.
In Deauville, yes.
Yeah.
So they had seen Robert Altman there, and they brought us a whole complete retrospective of 10 Altman films into the film school.
You mean Altman or Aldrich?
Robert Altman.
Okay.
Yeah. Robert Altman. And that was my first real meeting with a completely new kind of American genre film. And The Long Goodbye from the first moment was the film that I admired most. And the next thing was that the Bavaria at that time made films with American companies together, and you had stars like Robert Aldrich coming, doing Twilight's Last Gleaming, and he also came into the film school, another retrospective in the film school, and I was completely flashed. Yeah. And I thought, this is going to be what I would like to do if I am able to, if I have the skills to do it.
But you also mentioned in your strong fascination also for French and Italian cinema of that period, also because I think you said yesterday or the day before yesterday that you were looking at that because their films were more, let's say, adaptable, because they were also made with less money.
That's right. The literature part of that was reading crime novels, 100 a month, so to say, and starting with Ross MacDonald up to the whole Maigret series or so. And that is true that in the moment you had the opportunity to make a genre film in the TV, you had a very small budget. So you had to have examples of films who are also capable to make out of a small budget something extremely dynamic. And that is obviously not possible with American movies because they have much more money for every action scene. You had to look for different Vorbilder examples. And that was the French police film of the 80s. They made out of nothing, really, great action scenes and great films.
Yeah, and for something like you started out with the Founder, basically. I mean, that was your first school in action, which was also kind of actually you had to invent it yourself, basically, because that was something new also on German television. I
Yeah,
mean,
for all of us.
this
Nobody knew how to direct a car chase or so. You had you needed about 6-7 films to come to, well, at least make it work.
Yes, I should mention possibly tonight you can see one of the Founder episodes, one of the very best ones in my opinion, Nachtwache. It will be showing as a double feature with a later work, which is quite similar from another bigger series, Polizeiruf 110. But for you it was after the Founder, basically the next big crime project was Die Katze, which was quite a step up.
Yeah, you can say that. That was and that was really a big challenge from TV series up to such a big budget movie with 2 stars at that time, and I thought very, very intelligent story by Uwe Erichsen, rewritten by Christoph a bit, and I was really in trouble with that film because not always we had too little money, but also I was just on the edge of my capability. You know, that we had into this courtyard. You have to direct about 10 or 15 different perspectives. And that was something that in that way or in that completeness was never done in Germany before. So I was überfordert. What is that?
Out of my depth.
Out of my what?
You were out of your depth.
Out of my out of my depth in any way. Yeah. But I had to solve the problem and to make a film which I would like to look if I would be the audience, so to say. That was kind of a fight, also with the production system, but partly also with myself. I was really at some scenes I thought I have to give that away. Somebody else should do it. Don't you want to? like the director of an orchestra who just throws the stick away and says somebody else please. So, but in the end it came out quite well. It was even my only cinema commercial success. So after that, doors opened, and that was a good thing.
Speaking of crime fiction writers, you worked with almost all, let's say, major crime fiction writers in the Federal Republic in the last 30 years or so. How did that actually happen? I mean, besides Erichsen, you had also Ani. You had, geez, I'm missing one guy right now.
Who is in Köberle? Who wrote Köberle?
Oh yes, it's Felix Hubi.
Felix Hubi, yes.
I mean, we don't need to like him, but he's important. And how did that actually happen? Was this just chance, or are you actually also looking for these kinds of collaborations with these kinds of really versatile writers?
Well, I think if you make in such a continuity crime stories, and not only big ones but also small ones for these famous German series like Tatort or Polizeiruf, then in the years you come across all these authors. And if you work in a big company like the Bavaria was at that time, and I was some kind of it was like the old studio system, you know, where the director is making everything from a small film to a big film, if they give you the chance to do it. So you came across everybody, walked through these offices in a way, and you could just get linked with Uwe Erichsen, who did loads of Founders also, and wrote loads of very good novels. Just so for the we said that on Bahnhofsliteratur in a way, and they were always looking for new authors and new people, and that. So you couldn't avoid to meet all these people. And Friedrich Ani is something we met. I think before I made the Süden film. We knew each other already 15 years from Munich branche in that way. Everybody knows everybody. And Munich branche becomes smaller every day because everyone goes to Berlin.
Yeah, but it goes back then to Munich to work. I mean, it's like all the people from Cologne going to Munich and then taking the night train so that nobody notices that they are doing editing jobs for the Cologne television industry. Yeah. So it's actually, at a certain point you slowed down with your production of genre movies or with crime movies. Do you think you basically have exhausted the possibilities of that, let's say, the genre as a formal canon as well as the subjects, or would you say you have outgrown it?
Well, at a certain point, I would have wanted to outgrow it. I had with the next big feature film, Die Sieger, I had really run my head against a wall somehow. Not only meant running against the system, also running against my. I was that time. I really went too far with I overestimated my capabilities in a way. So I thought my life can't only consist of police lights going through. I was really, when I saw a policeman on the street, I was already thinking he's an extra. I was so much. So I can say, how do you dare giving me a ticket? I won't cast you in my next movie. Anyway, it became a bit of an obsession in a way. So I tried to find different ways, but also discovered the next genre, if you anyway. That was it's the old German melodrama. Yeah, that was with the author Markus Busch together, who just sent me out of the blue 3 enormously interesting melodrama scripts, which I already I wanted from the first moment. I wanted to make all 3 of them, and it had to be a trilogy. There's nothing else possible. That this in the end succeeded is something like a miracle, because normally these kind of plans in Germany don't fit into the system. But it was the next genre, and I think with this genre I came more and more closer to German film history, to what I have denied before. All my examples came from overseas, or from France, or from Italy, from England, but now slowly I had to get closer to films by Douglas Sirk or so to understand the mechanics of melodrama, and that was just, I think, opened, so to say, the next door.
It's interesting enough, probably the only genre where you can say that German cinema is really of major importance worldwide. I mean, Germany is one of the big melodrama traditions, and I was wondering, what would actually be your points of references for melodrama in German film history? Yes. You.
German melodramas you would...
Well, Sirk was always a name. Sirk was also one of the teachers in the film school. I didn't work with him, but others did. The next course, I think, did 2 films with him when he was old and making 2 short films, very impressive ones. And Sirk was together with Hawks and together with Aldrich these were directors which were given us from the. We became opportunities, became offers from our teachers. They didn't say you have to make a Schein oder sowas, wie heißt das an der Uni?
Make your
exams. Yeah. They just gave you offers to in a direction where you could think. So Sirk and the German melodrama from the beginning, and also through the Nazi era, was somehow always present, and seemed to me, when you watch at this kind of career, that it is really like going through a long corridor with doors opening, then that was the next point where I could have a panic room where I could go to after Die Sieger, so to say.
Did you actually? I mean, you were often talking about the importance of Zbigniew Brynich for your, let's say, your work from a certain point on, seeing them and suddenly having this kind of revelation. Could you?
Yeah, well, when I discovered that was through the wonderful cinema. Jeanette Mao, this in Cologne, this paper. But I actually, when I discovered Brynich, I found something so completely new that, to be true, I haven't quite tried to make a Brynich film, so to say, because his style is so unique and so difficult for me to adapt, that I can only look and say, how was that possible? How did that happen? How did he make it happen? You know, that's a completely different way from me. He had a way of losing control giving control away to the actors, to the camera. Just do what you want. Go like this with the camera and keeping it all in one shot. Yeah, I don't. Still up to now, I don't dare giving actors and the scene this kind of complete freedom. There I saw a sovereignty in German film, which I think never before and never afterwards was happening.
We were given a sign that now that we are actually just getting, after the warm-up period, we are actually already over with our time.
Yes, but at the high point with Dominik.
That's true. So let's close this here now on this zenith, this apex of film history, Spinek-Brinich. And I would like to thank you for your time and your patience and your interests, and we would of course encourage everybody to discover the works of Dominik Graf. For the next few days there will still be loads of his films to be seen here in Rotterdam, and you will find out that maybe there is a lot of that freedom that he thinks he hasn't discovered yet in his films. It's actually already there.
Thank you.
Maybe differently, but
it's definitely a cinema of very pure freedom. Thank you, Dominik.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.